I'll introduce myself briefly. My name is Ennis Baker, and I am the director for the IDI Care project, which I hope you'll Google and learn more about. I am also someone who has specialized in early childhood mental health, and specifically in early childhood mental health consultation for my whole career. So I'm very thrilled, after having Dr. Shivers as our keynote speaker for the North Carolina Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Association conference last fall, to have her back with all of us today. So I'm going to read a little bit about her. But first, sorry. Tell you a little bit about how we were able to bring Dr. Shivers to us today. The Early Childhood Initiative, established by the Center for Child and Family Policy, seeks to bring together scholars to address these challenges and produce world-class scholarship that helps maximize the potential of all children during the early childhood years. The ECI seminar series speakers range across disciplines, but share an interest in bringing cutting-edge science to bear on policies affecting young children. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Eva Marie Shivers, founder and executive director of the Indigo Cultural Center, which I hope you will also Google, a nonprofit action research firm located in Phoenix, Arizona. Her work at Indigo Cultural Center focuses on the developmental niche of infant and early childhood to explore the evolution of frameworks for understanding families' culturally adaptive responses to poverty, systemic racism, and historical marginalization. Indigo Cultural Center is part of the International Healing Justice Movement, and they apply liberatory consciousness principles in their infant mental health racial healing work across the country. For the past 19 years, Dr. Shivers has provided racial equity and research policy consultation to federal, state, and local government agencies and administrators. Shivers and her team at Indigo are currently leading national racial equity efforts to transform the infrastructure for the infant and early childhood mental health workforce. She received her PhD from UCLA's Department of Education in Psychological Studies and Education, and she also holds a law degree from Howard University School of Law and a BA in English Literature from Arizona State University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Eva Marie Shivers.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Ennis. Greetings, everyone. I wish I could see all of you. Oh, hi, I see some faces that I recognize. Hi, Mega. I'm just kind of scrolling through all the faces and names. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. So we only have a short time today, all right? And so we're gonna just kind of jump right in, and I'm gonna start to share my screen now. Okay, so let me just get situated here. Okay, so today we're going to talk about infant and early childhood mental health consultation, and really going to frame this initiative, this way of being, this approach of supporting the work of, I don't want to say just only early care and education, because it has definitely expanded into multiple settings, including home visiting, and there's mental health consultation with early intervention specialists, and we have mental health consultation in shelters and places where people who are unhoused are, pediatrician offices. We have mental health consultation now, hopefully more in home-based childcare settings as well. And so we're thinking a lot about what is the role of this approach, this very, very special approach that seems to be a very promising disruptor of not just bias, but I would say not just a disruptor. Also, I would probably add in the framing to say not just disruptor, but healing, which is something we don't often talk about in our initiatives with young children and in our systems building. And that is definitely the lens that we bring to the work. And you're going to hear more about that. So first, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. I'm coming to you today from what is known as Phoenix, Arizona. It is on the stolen ancestral lands of the O'odham tribe, and before that, the Hohokam people. This is a place where I've grown up. I am a third generation resident of South Phoenix, which is the Black and Brown area of Phoenix, Arizona. My son is fourth generation. This is where I grew up, and it continues to be also the home of Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. I honor the elders of both past and present, future generations of the Hohokam people and the O'odham Nation. I express gratitude for the stewardship of the land that my family and I and previous generations have occupied. And I stand in solidarity with First Nations by continuing to learn, to support revitalization of Indigenous ways, and also to heal my ancestors' complicity in benefiting from stolen land, specifically during the Homestead Act, right after Reconstruction, right after slavery. And with that, I will move on and share with you a little bit more. Our stance, my stance, hopefully our stance that we share is we just come to meet one another exactly where we are, right when we share a space together. And it's weird these days, you know, we're not really in the same space, but we are energetically all together. And I know that I took a look at the registration list, and I think that there are probably some people who aren't quite as familiar with mental health consultation. I think many of you are, just judging by your organizations. Some of you I know have heard me talk before. And so I'm going to share also a little bit about kind of where I'll be entering into this talk and kind of share some of the assumptions that I'm making so we can move forward relatively quickly. And I'd like to start by offering a video. It's called Pandemic is Portal. Some of you might be familiar with this already. I love starting this way because I like for us to not forget. For some of us, or actually for many of us, things really shifted during COVID. And for those of us who were fortunate enough to be able to stay safely within our homes, a lot shifted. So much shifted, like the way we think about the work, the way we do our work, who we are in the work. And we want to keep that portal open as long as possible. So I'd like to share something just as a provocation, as a way to get us started, and also for you to get a sense of where I'm coming from with all of this. Then this video was shared with me by my good friend and colleague, Khadijah Johnston, who is also an amazing thought leader in this subspecialty that we call infant and early childhood mental health consultation. All right, so I am going to pull up this video. And here we go.
Whatever it is, coronavirus has made the mighty kneel and brought the world to a halt, like nothing else could. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing for a return to normality, trying to stitch our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And in the midst of this terrible despair, it offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves. Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our databanks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world. And ready to fight for it.
Okay, yes, ready to fight for it, ready to imagine another world. So I just wonder how many of you are still in this place of reckoning, and how many of you, how many of you still feel the portal is open, and, for how many of you does it feel like it's closed? It's like totally business back to usual. I would urge all of us to keep that portal open as long as possible, to do whatever we can to go through that portal and to find other portals of healing. And on that note, for our framing today, in addition to thinking about portals and disruption, and what are we dragging through, and what are we leaving behind. This is, self-awareness, especially for those of you who are connected to the field of infant mental health or mental health in general. Self-awareness is such a big part of our work. And it's here, the diversity informed infant mental health tenets, it's the number one. And it really drives so much of what we're doing. And I when I say it, it might sound like I'm giving it lip service. And I hope that what you will get a sense of is that this tenet is so alive. It is alive, and it is also, I'm hoping, will be alive for you as you interact with some of the materials and the way that I'll be presenting today. My hope is that you can really center your own experience in this. In 2020, I would say a lot of people of color have already been reckoning with race for a very, 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 very long time. In fact, I was an English literature major in undergrad, and I specialized in slave narratives and literature from the Harlem Renaissance, civil rights rhetoric. And I will say that as I revisit literature from centuries ago, it's almost as if these same words could be spoken today, and it's still true. We really have not made a whole lot of progress. And so, I think the reckoning that happened in 2020 was really a reckoning among white people to say, okay, yeah, it's time for us to also get on board with this. And I'm grateful for that. And so much of what that reckoning has brought is more self-awareness and more understanding of who we are in this work and how we do our work. It is everything. We're not going to do introductions, but so today, there's not a lot of time, but I am going to touch on some of the current context of where we are with race and equity. I'll share with you a little bit about our framework and how we approach work specifically in mental health consultation. We'll share some research findings, and then we'll talk about what it means to transform our work. And specifically in this talk, I'll be honing in on diversity in our mental health consultation workforce. And then we'll think just a little bit about where we go from here. Since I will be rushing through a lot of this content, please do write down questions, or even not just questions, but pay attention to even things that you hear that are either resonating with you or things that absolutely do not resonate with you. That's way more instructive, in fact. And I hope that I say things that don't resonate with you, because those are the moments where we can hopefully turn inward and say, why did that not land with me? And what I'm asking you to do, what so many of us are asking for right now in this moment, is to pause long enough to question those long-held narratives that have never been questioned, those narratives that we just accept. We say, oh, these are the rules. These are the rules I have to play by. I have to go down this pathway, then I have to do this, this, and this in order to get to here. This is just how it is. This is how it's always been. This is what we've set up. These are our best practices. These are our standards of practice. These are evidence-based. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. This is, what will it take for us collectively to pause long enough to really examine those narratives that we have held dear, including myself, that we have held dear? And it is uncomfortable, yes. And through that discomfort, there will be growth, as Resmaa Menakem reminds us. Well, I'll keep going. I could just. So here are some of the assumptions that I am making, kind of going into this. I am assuming that some of you, many of you, have some familiarity with infant and early childhood mental health consultation. And if you don't, I will define that, I think, on the next slide. I'm assuming that many of you, I'm not going to be covering all the data on preschool expulsion. If you're interested in that and want to learn more about that, you can either reach out to me, or you can simply Google Walter Gilliam preschool expulsion and see what comes up. And along, kind of connected to the preschool expulsion, is awareness of racial and gender disparities. So I'm not going to be going into that data actually very much, but a lot of our work is absolutely premised on that work and on that data. Okay, so let's talk about infant and early childhood mental health consultation. And I'm going to define it briefly before we move on. I'm going to just define it in my own words. Usually I have a statement. For those of you who are not as familiar with infant and early childhood mental health consultation, this is an initiative that is prevention based. A lot of people kind of assume when they hear mental health that it's really addressing very directly, almost like child therapy, like almost like direct therapeutic intervention at the child level. And what mental health consultation is more adult focused. It is focused on building the capacity of those caregivers and those adults who work with young children so that they can be, kind of more aware of what they are bringing into the relationship. They can become curious about the meaning of children's behaviors. They learn and understand more about how trauma impacts children's relationships, behaviors, how it impacts families. There's a strong focus on social and emotional learning. And when a lot of times when we talk about mental health consultation, particularly in early care and education settings, we think of it almost kind of having 3 levels or 3 tiers, not to be thought of as like mutually exclusive, but they kind of flow into each other. And in general, mental health consultation can be parsed at the child level. So often a consultant will come in to work with an early care and education teacher, and there will be a child who will be presenting, let's say, with some challenging behaviors, and that child will be the focus of their consultation. The consultant is not there to fix the child or to do therapy on the child. The mental health consultant is there to really kind of be in relationship with early educators and to lean into difficult conversations and to create this kind of feeling of trust and connection so that those teachers and caregivers and also administrators like center directors can have really authentic, vulnerable conversations. And so much of the strength of mental health consultation hinges on that, what we call the consultative alliance. That is the secret sauce. It is that relationship. Mental health consultation is not meant to be short-term necessarily, although there are many iterations of it. And so in some states, there is a model that is more short-term. But I would say in general, around the country, there's this recognition that the longer a mental health consultant works with the site, there starts to develop, this is a term that I'm borrowing from our friends in San Francisco, institutional knowledge, like at a childcare center or at a site, institutional knowledge of what it's like to be partnering with somebody who holds that infant mental health perspective. So I think I'll stop there for now with my definition. I could go on and on. It's a hard thing to understand. It's a hard thing to explain to people, and it can lead to a lot of confusion when consultants first start working with caregivers. So I will tell you a little bit about our work in mental health consultation. But before that, I want to say, what's been going on around the country. There has been a national movement in mental health consultation around equity, racial equity in particular. And so, this really, I think, kicked off probably back in maybe the report I remember hearing about that came out of Yale from Walter Gilliam was the report where he really talked about preschool expulsions and the racial disparities and how African-American boys in particular, but also Latino children, and there's such huge racial disparities, the intersectionality of gender and race with preschool expulsions. And one of the things that Walter found in his study, this big national study, he found that when there was the presence of a mental health consultant, we didn't see as many incidents of suspension and expulsion from preschool. And so that kind of kicked off more of a kind of a national, desire maybe for mental health consultation. And then remembering his statistics on race and those deep and troubling racial disparities, we started digging more into that research to find out, well, what's up there? Does mental health consultation, in fact, close those disparities? And I'll share some of that data with you a little bit later. So there are many states and regions and territories and communities who are now really, really trying hard to center and integrate equity throughout the work. And, the Center of Excellence for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation has really been a strong voice and a strong champion for that equity agenda. They had their first inaugural equity conference last year, and I think they're gearing up for another one. I don't know if you're on those mailing lists, but if you're not and you're interested in mental health consultation, you should absolutely be on their mailing list. They have so many resources. So there is a lot of traction, and not just in mental health consultation. I would say in infant mental health, or I'm trying to expand it, infant and early childhood mental health in general. There's a movement happening. There is a movement. We are in a movement right now. We are in a movement. We're in it. For those of you who are championing it at your organizations and presenting on it and training on it, you are thought leaders and warriors in this movement. And we need more of us to be in this movement. So there is a lot that's been happening. And what I'd like to share with you is some of our work, not to really for you to memorize anything on this slide, but just to kind of give you a sense of what we've been up to and our role in helping to shape this movement. So I would say, oh my gosh, we've done so many evaluations in the space of mental health consultation. And here are some of the states and communities that we've partnered with. And we've either been the lead on evaluation or we've consulted with the evaluation team. So lots of evaluation and research in this area. We also do a lot of training and policy TA and consultation to state administrators around the country. And here just a sampling of some of the issues that we've been processing and talking about in some of these areas. And then on the national scene, at Indigo Cultural Center, we've had a role in groups that have really helped shape this subspecialty that we call mental health consultation. So some of you might have heard about the RAIN group. It was kind of like a think tank, and that kind of was a precursor to the Center of Excellence. So we were a member of the Center of Excellence for a number of years down here, and we did a beautiful study. We partnered with Georgetown, where we took a look at mental health consultation with family, friend, and neighbor childcare. There's not much happening, by the way. We want more to be happening. There's a beautiful report. If you're interested in family, friend, and neighbor care, look for that report. And I'll keep track of some of the resources I'm mentioning too, and maybe we can send it to folks after. And then at Indigo Cultural Center, we're doing more and more at a national level. Like, for example, right now, we just started convening a national learning table. And I think we have, I can't remember the exact number of teams, maybe 15 state teams. And these are systems builders and systems leaders coming together to talk and think deeply and authentically around diversity in our workforce. And it is time for us to have some really hard conversations and some really uncomfortable conversations. And we're very interested in holding space while we do that work together. I don't think one person or one group or one entity has the answers. We have to co-create and co-generate these answers, and we need time and space to do that. So yes, why did I share that with you? To brag, fine, okay, fine, maybe a little, but no, really to let you know that what I'm sharing with you and my opinions are absolutely 100% shaped by the stories that I've heard and the lessons that we've learned and all the examples that we've seen of the many ways that mental health consultation can really just play out and how it is beautifully, when it goes well, it is beautifully tailored to specific community trends and the political context of various states. And so all of the insights that I'm sharing with you, it comes from that work that we do with other people. And so I think I'm going to skip this slide for now, because I tend to ramble when I go through this slide. But basically what this slide is helping you understand is that sometimes there is a little bit of a dysregulation that many of us feel when we have to come together to work on equity and to talk about issues like race and oppression. And our way of working with people is really kind of that earlier slide that I showed. We meet people exactly where they are the moment we begin to share a space together. And so, there's a continuum of understanding and knowledge and development. And we say, come as you are. All that matters is that you come and you stay for the hard bits too. I do want to call out the last one. The process is the work. The process is the work. And I know that we've heard iterations of that over and over again. And I will underline that and put exclamation points behind that as much as I can. We can right now probably come up with a great master plan to have more diversity in the workforce. But I guarantee you, if we don't slow down, if we don't unearth the assumptions that we make behind these narratives that drive who's in the workforce and who's not, if we don't create the time and space to come together and to build enough trust to have hard conversations, if we don't stop grinding ourselves into the ground, we will never be able to imagine a future, and to implement. Even the best of plans cannot be implemented if we stay stuck in grind culture, where we don't slow down enough to understand how we do the work. That matters. That matters. That is the work. When we transform our ways of doing the work, transform our relationships, ourselves, that's when we will start to see change. Yes, we need concrete policies. Yes, we need concrete strategies. But you see, there's a lot of good work that's already happened. There's a lot of good work that's already happened. How come it hasn't stuck? Why do we continue to see these deep disparities? Something else has to shift. When we think about that portal, my hope and wish is that coming through that portal kind of has primed us to maybe think about who we are in the work in a different way. Okay, I think that what I've covered is a lot of what I have on these other slides, and I'm going to skip to the research, but I do want to pause very quickly before I go on. This is something else that's really important that I really would like to model and assert over and over again, that we need to do more of this with each other. I'd like to share, for those of you who don't know me, a little bit about how I walk through this world and a little bit about my identity. I identify as a cisgendered African-American biracial woman. And my father is the descendant of enslaved Africans, as am I. My mother is German. I was born in Germany. My first language was German. We immigrated here when I was very young. So I grew up in Tempe, Arizona. Not a whole lot of Black folks in Tempe, Arizona back then. Definitely not a lot of interracial couples. I was born in 1970. And 1970 was not too long after the U.S. versus Loving Supreme Court case, where it finally was legal for a Black person to marry a white person in this country. I was born not long after that case was decided, so societal attitudes had not shifted and changed much. So growing up interracially, identity and racial issues were all, like, I never got away from them. This theme of othering and belonging, has always been a part of my life. What else? My professional identity, is really probably right at the crossroads of infant mental health and early care and education. In my early career, all of my work was in early care and education. I studied internal working models of teachers and attachment relationships. And so when I discovered mental health consultation, probably that was, what year was that I finally started to learn about that? Maybe 2009. Or 2008, I was so excited. What else do you need to know about me? Well, some of you saw my son at the very beginning. His name is Elijah, and he is a big reason why I do what I do. We homeschool him. That's why he's here right now at whatever time it is in the middle of the morning. And my ancestors, my great grandparents in particular, who are also the descendants of enslaved Africans, their work starting a Black township in New Mexico and their search for Black sovereignty, and they started schools and churches and they worked the land. Their work absolutely influences me. I feel them whispering. I feel them kind of pushing me from behind. I very much, they are present in the work that I do. The work that I do definitely mirrors my spiritual beliefs. And I like to be transparent about that. It's probably not a surprise to many people, but what I believe about love and our interconnectedness and about universal consciousness absolutely plays into everything that we do here at Indigo. And I am also an advocate for bringing our whole selves into the work. Yes, including our spiritual selves too. It's like time to bring spirituality out of the closet as well. I'm going to skip to some of the research. I'd like to share the research with you that we've done. And and as I'm sharing these findings, I'm hoping that you can pause and write down some questions and wonderings, and how is it sitting with you? Again, I'm hoping that you can interact with this material on two levels. One is kind of collectively, and I'm going to go here really quick. Our collective well-being. This is what I was ranting on about earlier. Slowing down enough to explore our collective well-being. Who are we? Where do we come from? So understanding the history of how we got here and why are we here? What is the purpose? Where are we going? These are all narratives. These are all narratives. And as Miss Toni Morrison reminds us that narrative is radical. It's not just a nice kumbaya moment that helps us feel good, warm fuzzies inside. It is radical. And it creates us at the very moment it is being creative. So what are our existing narratives? And what are the narratives we want to change? What are the new narratives that many of us, more and more of us, are bringing into this work? Because it is radical and we need to talk and speak on those narratives. And if we hear a narrative that doesn't sit well with us, we need to pause and inquire and unpack. Right? But in order to do that, especially with one another, we need to have the kinds of relationships and dynamics that allow us to do that, right? And things not shut down. Yeah. Okay, so back to the research. So I'll start with the first one. But first I want to say, so the first set of slides are based on the work that we've done here in Arizona. And the mental health consultation initiative is called Smart Support, and it's funded by First Things First, which is it's a state agency funded by tobacco tax money. I think similar to North Carolina and California. So that's how we get our money to do this work. And then we also just completed a really exciting evaluation with our friends in San Francisco. And for those of you who are not familiar, in San Francisco, they've been doing mental health consultation since the 70s. And most of what we know about the approach to mental health consultation has come from our colleagues in San Francisco. The consultative stance, which appears in a book that Khadijah Johnston wrote about mental health consultation in childcare settings. The consultative stance is probably one of our key and seminal works that helps new consultants and supervisors in this work understand the comportment, how it is that we need to be in this work. And so we're going to share some findings from both of those studies. So first, with Arizona, with Smart Support, we collected a lot of data. We collected a lot of data over a course of 5 years, a lot of data at the program level for childcare centers, at the director level, the teacher level, the classroom level, the child level, the consultant level. We collected a lot of data. And what we found is that all the outcomes that we hoped would change, they changed. The negative outcomes got better, the positive outcomes did I say that right? Yeah, negative outcomes were, things moved in the direction we expected them to move. Okay, so that was kind of our first level of analysis. And then we wanted to look a little bit deeper into the racialized disparities. And what we found was that for teachers, I'm going to say this very carefully, for teachers of African-American boys, because the data that we collected at the child level was teacher report. So it's teacher report. We didn't have individual observers going in assessing children. This is teacher report, teacher experiences, teacher perceptions, teacher report. So what we saw was that the racial disparities were closed for teachers of African-American boys. What we saw from baseline to 6 months, actually covered 12 months. Conflict, teacher-child conflict decreased, risk of expulsion decreased. And this happened despite the fact that few consultants had explicit conversations about racism. And so we were I was happy, but also really curious about this finding. And as soon as we analyzed the data, I came back to the consultants, and we had a lot of focus groups throughout this whole evaluation with the consultants, kind of help us understand all the data we were collecting. And I said, well, how many of you were talking about race? And most of them had that deer in the headlights, like, were we supposed to? But, so about a third raised their hand. And so then we started really a long exploration of, well, what was it about, what is it about consultation that closed these gaps, even though you weren't explicitly talking about race? And I want to be really clear here. This finding is not to suggest that we shouldn't talk about race. This finding is to suggest there's something about consultation that really primes teachers to kind of consider their relationships with children of color in a different way. So the question then becomes, what happens if more of us get skilled and confident in talking about race and leaning in and kind of seeing how it plays out in our day-to-day work. We also found that a stronger consultative alliance, right, between consultant and teacher, it predicted a positive change in all these beautiful outcomes, right? Attachment, negative environment, well, it decreased the negative environment, closeness, self-efficacy, but these outcomes were only increased when the mental health consultant shared the same ethnic heritage as the teacher. Again, it says implications for the workforce, or the consultant had self-reported expertise in equity topics like cultural responsiveness and anti-bias. And so these findings and this analysis was led by Annie Davis, who used to be at Georgetown. She used to be with the COE. She's done some really, really great work. Probably is continuing to do really good work too. This kind of raised the question, well, now it's really imperative that we take a look at who is in the workforce, And so now we have two pathways. We have a shared ethnic and racial heritage, and then we also have consultants. The predominant group of people who work as consultants are white and female. So this is not to suggest that everybody should have an ethnic match. We also need to work with the workforce that we currently have, which is white and female. So already you see kind of two pathways emerging in terms of implications for this finding. In regards to a racial ethnic match, we also did some sort of analysis around this in San Francisco, and we'll send around that report too. It's really beautiful. We're very proud of it. And what we found, you don't have to take all of this in. This really is like kind of a visual impact. Over here on the left, consultees, so teachers or directors in this case, whose ethnicity and race match their consultants, they reported higher levels of helpfulness in all these areas, okay? So 16 out of the 19 domains, we had significance in comparison to those who were not matched by ethnicity or race. So we're seeing now in multiple other settings and other studies that there is something that is happening when there is a cultural and racial, and I would probably argue linguistic match as well. And then finally, a paper that we're currently working on, this one is a little bit harder to understand, but it's pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to try to explain this. So when mental health consultation was provided in childcare programs that had higher percentages of African-American children and families, we saw improvements in teacher-rated organizational climate and improvements in hopelessness. And all of these improvements also led to a reduction in child risk of expulsion. And so, our work, one of the reasons I think why it's taking us so long to finish this paper is I'm still really trying to understand how and why all these dots are connected. I'm just excited that they are because we do talk about the fact that, effective mental health consultation should be working at all of those levels at the they have some, consultants work with directors and helping to shape the climate. Hopelessness comes from a self-efficacy scale. So absolutely, that's where we see that adult focused intervention. And then ultimately, this is the outcome that a lot of our policy makers are caring about more and more these days, a reduction in child risk of expulsion. And then there's something even just about the makeup of the center where these connections held true. So we're still kind of trying to understand all of that. So I think, for us, when we think about diversity in the workforce, some of my key reflections over the years, and we've worked with many states and communities that are just trying their own way. They're trying all kinds of things to diversify their workforce. They are eliminating the requirement for a master's degree. They're opening it up to disciplines beyond those who are licensed and licensed eligible. And by the way, Illinois has always had a multidisciplinary workforce, and so I think we have a lot to learn from. We continue to have a lot to learn from Illinois. But what this has also opened up is an understanding that it's not enough to just, change the job description or to recruit in new areas. We absolutely have to lean into understanding things like, well, what are the pathways into higher education? And what do people, if they are going to pursue a master's, what fields are they going to be going into? It's not necessarily clinical mental health for many people of color. There are reasons for that. And again, so this is like a nod to history. We need to know where we've come from. So, pathways and pipelines. In San Francisco, for example, they had a program within the Chinese community working with high school students to start to attract them into this pathway of mental health consultation, high school students. So high school students. It brings to mind, who are the people doing the interviews? What are your interview questions? Once people are hired, how do you onboard? If you are going to have a multidisciplinary workforce, do you have a pathway, a learning onboarding for those who don't come in with a strong mental health background? Do you have an onboarding for those who don't come in with a strong understanding of communities of color or the communities they'll be working in? So we have to think about our ongoing and whether there might be different tracks. What about professional learning? Reflective supervision. There's another study we just finished with the Alliance for the Advancement of Infant Mental Health, where we really explore decolonization and reflective supervision. And so this absolutely has so much to do with our mental health consultants and the way that they're supervised and by whom. Issues around retention, reducing microaggressions in organizations, leadership. We know leadership matters. We know that non-performative leadership matters. And so those are some of the issues. Diversity in the workforce is not just about recruiting mental health consultants in new and unique places. It is much more expansive and broad. And so this comes back to, those are the considerations. This really comes back to this issue of how are we, I call it how we be. Got that from Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. How we be, how do we have these conversations? That has everything to do with understanding how we start to address all these different levels. And so here's just a kind of a quick slide. If I were to leave you with some concrete recommendations, again, it's at all these different levels. And when we understand race and we understand the systems that support oppression and the subjugation of many individuals, we must have a systemic lens, in understanding that. There are many wonderful resources out there that we don't have to recreate, we can lean on and use. And then I think probably more than anything, what I always emphasize is, how do we dig deeper? What is our inner work? How do we relearn our history in this field? Not, history in the country, but history for infant mental health. How do we start to question some of those long held narratives, and what does that mean? What does that mean? And what tension does that bring up? I mean, so much is happening right now. Understanding internalized oppression, understanding whiteness, the role of capitalism in race. But I think more than anything, I have, in bold letters here, develop a body practice. This could be meditation, yoga, a walking meditation. Some people find art to be one of their body practices. The point is, if we come full circle and go back to that portal, who are you after coming through this portal of the pandemic? The pandemic opened up a portal. How did you step through it? And what are you still carrying with you? And what have you shed? What have you left behind you? It is imperative that we examine how grind culture is influenced, the ways that we go straight to business, straight to our agenda, straight to doing, even for those of us who have the most passionate commitment to social justice. If we do not slow down, if we don't address the healing that needs to happen within ourselves and between one another, we will keep recreating the same things. We will. We have to start working in different ways. And with that, I will end with this beautiful quote by Mr. Jimmy Baldwin. And he says, if I love you, love you. Love. And I think the love he's talking about is not anemic, wimpy love. He's talking about powerful love, the kind that Martin Luther King talked about. If I love you, there is power in love. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you do not see. How can we do that for ourselves, with one another? Please reach out to me with additional questions, reflections, resources. I get my best resources from many of you out there. And I'll end there for now, and maybe we can open it up for some more questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shivers. That was amazing. And now we're going to move into some questions and answers. And I know the way the chat works, you have to chat directly to us for us to be able to see your questions. So we do have a couple. The first question we got was asking for examples. You mentioned Illinois as a state that we should look to as a to not reinvent the wheel. Any others that you would say we should learn from?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah. And again, I'm just going to say the states I'm familiar with. Okay. Maryland. Maryland is doing really amazing things. Oh my gosh, Kate and Margot and Laura and Angelique, they are, oh my gosh. And they have the support of a legislator, of somebody at the state who has been advocating with the legislator for more money, for different ways of doing this. So they are really getting very creative about pathways into the profession, the way that they support the profession. They are integrating equity at all the levels. I provide consultation to the leadership so that their leaders are continuously processing how they lead. Every time I talk to them, there's more and more. So Maryland gets me really excited. And then, historically, I think we can still learn a lot from San Francisco. I was already inspired by the work that they have done, but when we partnered with them and I got to dig deeper into the history, and we kind of saw 3 parallel tracks of mental health consultation that unfolded, and then they converged like in the late 90s, I think. We have a lot to learn from San Francisco as well. They have a strong legacy, and their long-lasting relationships and the way that they just breathe culture from their communities, the way that they embody it, it is mind-blowing. I have a lot to learn from them. So yeah, I think those 2 states, and other states are doing amazing things too. But I think, taking a look at what those 2 states are doing is really inspiring.
Thank you. And I see a few more popping in. Katie, do you want to ask the question you have while I look at the others?
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Shivers. This has been so great to talk about. And I would love to hear more. One of the things that we think about a lot is how important it is for the adults to be well, and that the adults have to be well in order for them to do the work with the kids. And so I was really interested in your study about early childhood mental health consultation, changing the organizational climate and reducing hopelessness. And I wondered if you had a thought about what strategies or what components of that work were central to those 2 outcomes.
Okay, yes. Oh, Jack, come here. It's okay. It's okay. We must be getting a delivery. Yes. Yes, I think the most common theme that I am asked to process with groups these days are themes around resilience, hope, rest, healing, and not just Jack, it's okay. And not just in mental health consultation. I mean, for early care and education in particular, we thought turnover was bad before. We thought, burnout was bad before. I mean, as people are coming back after COVID, our early care and education workforce, there's trauma. There's just so many multiple layers of trauma. And so what we're finding is that the mental health consultants, not everywhere, but we're hearing more and more stories of the shift from there's always going to be case consultation at the child level, but we're also, especially during COVID, there was a lot of supportive directors, just like helping them hold it together, helping them keep their doors open. And I remember being in another conversation and we were talking about quality with a big Q, right? Quality, how we consider quality. And it was a policy conversation. Somebody stopped and said, helping people keep their doors open is quality right now. Like that's kind of that's where our work is right now. And what I appreciated about many of the mental health consultants during COVID is the way that they were able to pivot so quickly, because the approach in mental health consultation, there's not a manualized approach. It's a dance that you do kind of based on the needs of the individual or the organization or the relationship. And so they were able to pivot. And I know during COVID, there's a lot of support of the adults, a lot of mental health support of the adults. And so, in mental health consultation, we call it programmatic consultation. That's what happens at the organizational level. And one of the things that we find very important in our measurement strategy, in our evaluation strategy, is to pay attention to what's happening with those child care center directors, what's happening at that organizational level. I think in general, our research models do not account enough for what is happening at the levels of the organizational climate, and even like who the director is as a leader, as an individual, as a human being. We don't do enough of that. I'm a big advocate for center directors also. We don't understand their work enough. So I don't know if there are any other follow-up questions to that, but yeah, and then I thought in particular those findings and the fact that we only found that pattern in centers where there is a predominance of African-American children and families. And it wasn't even necessarily a predominance of African-American teachers that came out in our analysis. It was the makeup of the center and this link to organizational climate, hopelessness, and child expulsion. So I'm still trying to understand, like, I feel like I keep asking everybody, what does this bring up for you? You know, talking to a lot of consultants about it. So we're still trying to make sense of it, but it just feels like it's a really important issue to be addressing, particularly right now, particularly after COVID. And we collected that data before COVID. So I suspect that if we were to collect the data now, we might find those connections to be even stronger.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions. We won't be able to get to them all, unfortunately, but it looks like it's resonating with people, the concept of slowing down of grind culture. Someone described it as a glorification of busy. So do you have any suggestions of how to have effective change around that at the organizational level? How do we?
I have a lot of ideas because we're trying it here at Indigo Cultural Center, and it's not easy. First and foremost, if you have any position of power in your organization, I think there has to be a time where you can really interrogate your own internal narratives about what it means to hold power and what it means to be a decision maker. And for us here, we started our big transition by examining, I don't have it right next to me. Usually I have it right here. There's this document that's been floating around by Tima and Okun, The Habits of White Supremacy. And so I know that a lot of organizations have done this as well. So first and foremost, I began my own interrogation like constantly. Like I think for probably 2 years, I continued to interrogate just my role as a decision maker and a leader, and how I am complicit in maintaining and upholding many of these habits and culture of white supremacy. And then and as I started doing it for myself, and I would stop myself in a meeting, especially with my team members, and I would stop and say, oops, I'm doing it again. For example, this is perfectionism. This is perfectionism. I am embodying perfectionism right now. And I would just name it, and I would just get silent, and we would sit with it. And of course, my team said, "Oh, it's okay. No, I'm like, no. Like, let's dig into this." And so for me, I would start by not calling myself out in a derogatory way, but just noticing out loud with my team. And then I noticed they would start to do it too. And then now we just name it when it shows up in our work, especially in our evaluation work. It really shows up a lot. I don't know. It's so hard to be in this field as a researcher and evaluator and not be complicit, because I won't go into that. There's a lot there. If you are in academia, there is so much that we have to undo and it's hard because in academia, many of us do identify as being progressive. And so we think, oh no, oh yes. And I was socialized in academia, and I'm still healing from many of the ways that I was socialized. Not personally by my advisor. My advisor was wonderful. She was the one who helped me understand race and identity and all of that, and how to work with communities. But I think institutionally, it's just always there. So modeling it as a leader, and then your team starts to model it, and then you start to kind of do it together. But it's also having the kinds of conversations where you can not get dysregulated when you veer from your agenda. There's always going to be the timelines and the urgent matters and the fires to put out. And yet there still has to be space for when these things come up, being primed and ready to pause and sit with it and ask questions and listen. So we see, so much of it is absolutely about the kind of relationships we create with each other. And then I recently started reading. I've been a follower of the NAP ministry for quite some time. I don't know if some of you have heard of the NAP ministry. The founder of the NAP ministry, Barbara Hersey, she has a book called Rest is Resistance. Oof. Oof. Haven't even made it through chapter 1, and I can tell you it is turning my life upside down. In a good way, but also in a way that does feel dysregulated because I'm questioning so much now. But one of the things that she talks about in the beginning part of the book is something called radical community care. Radical community care, radical community care. And so I think about that as like our little community here at Indigo, and I would probably extend it to that other layer of people and organizations we work closely with, like radical community of care. And what that means is that if somebody comes to our call and they're sick, we say, please, will you just, you don't have to be here, like really meaning it. You don't have to be here. And if somebody says, you know, I don't know, like kind of, I need to take a yoga class and it's the middle of the day because that's the only time I can take it. Go take a yoga class because I know it's going to make what you do here with our work, it's going to make it that much stronger, you know, or you need a, you know, like we had one member of our team who was just grinding on a big writing deadline. And she was exhausted. I could see it in her eyes. And she's a young woman and she didn't want to stop. And it was hard because I was like, I want to respect her as an adult. And I see her just crumbling. And we were supposed to have a meeting yesterday morning and I could just see it in her face. See it in her face. And I said, we don't have to have this meeting right now. This will get done. Go take a break. Go take a break. Go take a walk. Do whatever you need to. Go take a walk. Go take a break. So as leaders, I think it's giving our team permission, but also, and this is the hard lesson that I had to learn. I was already doing that for my team. I wasn't doing it for myself. And it occurred to me, if I just say, okay, team, go forward and like get out of grind culture and take care of yourself. And yes, rest is resistance, but I'm not doing it myself. What's the difference between me and another leader who says, yes, we're all about equity, but that leader is not doing their own work and their own interrogation and their own healing around it. But they're like, yeah, team, go ahead, go do equity. And they have all these strategies and procedures and activities in place, but it is clear that they're, what's the difference? So I recognize also a little bit of my own hypocrisy in encouraging my team to like, you know, rest and not grind, but I wasn't doing it. So that was a really big wake up moment for me. And again, like I've been socialized to just drive. Yes, I grew up with that narrative. In order to succeed in this country as a Black person, you have to be 3 times better. I grew up with those explicit multi-generational messages. Absolutely. And so undoing that is probably going to take me the rest of my life.
Thank you, Dr. Shivers. I'm sad that we have come to the close of our time with you, but one of the things you have clearly done is leave us wanting more. And so thank you. Thank you for that challenge to all of us to keep this conversation going. Thank you for being here today. And thank you to all of you for taking this time. There's a feedback survey in the chat. And also we on March 22nd, have Chantel Meek coming to speak with us. So yes, I know a colleague of Eva's. So we hope you'll be back with us then. Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.